How specifically might these experiences of trauma affect a child's social emotional abilities?
I think one of the things that's so important for everybody, the adults involved and the children, is self regulation. And we can't practice self regulation until we feel calm. So, trying to find ways to develop social emotional learning with masks and social distancing kind of presents a whole new problem that many of us have never had to deal with before. So, try and get them to express their feelings. What are you feeling? Talk to them on their level. Ask them questions about what they're feeling. Share with them what you're feeling.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to separate, to figure out what's going on here, and then, seeing how it's affecting everyone else, and really taking that step back and reflecting and taking the time to say, I have to center myself, or I'm no good to anyone else.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times we end up blaming the children or blaming the families or blaming COVID-19 instead of sort of taking a deep breath and saying, it's up to me. Chaim Gnot once said that he almost sees it as though he's the weatherman. And if he's in a good mood and he's ready to teach and he's ready to do what he needs to do, it's going to be a good class. Everyone's going to enjoy it. But if he's not coping well with his own situation, no one is going to have a good time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I thought that was a good thought.
That's a very good thought. And that kind of leads me through this next question. We're all working through these transitions and these changes. And I've heard you talk about a need for a paradigm shift. So this kind of leads us right into that. Maybe you could help us understand what a paradigm shift means and how we really can try to do that. Because it's not easy.
Yeah. No. I think, like I said, it's very hard for teachers to look beyond a child's behavior and respond right now to a child who's behaving aggressively or inappropriately or just tantruming for what you perceive as no reason at all, with empathy and flexibility, and to encourage the child to identify and tap into their own feelings. And what we need to do is we need to, instead of asking ourselves, the adults, what's wrong with this child? We need to start asking ourselves, what happened to this child? What have they been dealing with? What have they been through? And we need to find ways, and teachers need to find ways to respond to the child's inappropriate behavior that show that they care and support the child through these hard times. Because, as I mentioned, it is all about the importance of a caring adult to mitigate what the children are feeling and the after effects or the impact of this trauma as we're still going through it. So we really need to be able to do that. And so instead of seeing a disobedient, defiant, angry child who needs to be disciplined, we need to see a scared, anxious child who needs respect, kindness, and compassion. We're hearing a lot about trauma informed practice. And I think what we really need to recognize is that trauma informed practice is best practice. It's really not something we haven't done before. It's using a whole child approach, promoting a sense of belonging, and supporting children who are struggling. So, as much as we have to control how we're feeling, we have to take that deep breath, we have to look at what's underneath that behavior and help the child to feel safe rather than to discipline them or get angry or expect them to do something differently.
Yeah. That can be really hard to do, though, if a child, say, is out of control. Because I know with this, it's scary, it's uncertain, and the little ones may not be able to express themselves with language, and all they have is behavior and feelings. And as this bottles up, and these feelings are there, and they don't know what to do, they can all of a sudden seem out of control.
Yeah, when kids lose control, when kids are really out of control, when they're tantruming, when they're throwing things around, it can be very scary for everybody. It's probably pretty scary for the child who's engaging in that behavior, and it's pretty scary for the kids who are observing it, and it's very scary for the teachers because they have to keep themselves safe, the children safe, and that child safe. It's hard to know exactly what they're feeling. Chances are they are very anxious. and they're really worrying about, am I safe here? I don't want to be here. Nobody understands me. They don't feel connected to their environment. There are lots and lots of reasons that come behind that behavior. Every child has a different kind of response, or like I mentioned before, their own past, their own story that they're bringing with them. Often what is behind this is a complete sense of I have no control over anything anymore. And like you mentioned, everything is so different and I don't like it. They feel completely disempowered, and they just feel they maybe can't do things as well as their peers. If it's an activity and everyone is cutting or painting and they suddenly start to feel like I can't do this the same way. Or maybe it's somebody's facial expression or a loud noise or something you didn't even hear or recognize, but that child felt or perceived it as a threat. So it's very hard to know. And sometimes it doesn't really matter when they are totally out of control at that point, what is behind the behavior, because that's not the time to talk to them. That's the time to let them kind of get through it physically. So if they're tantruming, that's let it go through. And what you need to do is you need, first of all, to keep the other children safe. But what you do when they're tantruming, when they're throwing things around, you need to be present so they know you're there because they don't feel safe. But eye contact can become a very useful tool if it is culturally acceptable. So that what you do is you are physically present, you are very aware of what they're doing, but you're not making any eye contact with them as they are out of control in that behavior, whether it's tantruming, throwing things, whatever it might be. And when they take a breath, because every child needs to take a breath, we all need to breathe. That's not really changing the behavior, but it's what can be called a close approximation. That's what you want them to do, to take a breath, to start breathing, to change the behavior. That's when you make eye contact. And that eye contact, you now need to be very self-regulated, not take this behavior personally, but recognize your job is there to help that child calm down. That's the goal right now. And if your eye contact says, even if it's just 2 seconds, I'm here with you, we're going to be okay. His breath is over, he starts throwing things around, but that eye contact comforted him in some way. So chances are he's going to take another breath and look at you, and you're going to give him that eye contact again and say, I'm here for you. It's okay. And this is sort of a give and take thing that can take up to 15 minutes or it can happen in 5. It depends on how out of control the child was or what's really happening inside. It's not always the same at all. And once the child has calmed down, that's when you can, if he's thrown everything around the room, okay, let's pick things up and put them back. And then how are you feeling, and talk about those feelings. But it's very important to get that child to calm down, because anything you say to that child is just like adding fuel to the fire. It's just going to escalate the behavior. So it's a very different kind of approach, but it makes a difference and it allows the child to gain self-control and feel good about themselves at the end, because that's very, very important. And it's not punitive. So you've actually built a stronger relationship with that child, and that child knows they can trust you through no matter what.